From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The United States alleges violations of federal safety and operational regulations, including a failure to take the necessary precautions to secure the Macondo well prior to the April 20th explosion.
Clearly one of the biggest stories of 2010, the BP oil spill. As the federal government sues BP and 8 other companies, we'll take a look at Deepwater Horizon's final hours with Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter David Barstow. He led a major investigation into how the explosion aboard the rig happened. Then, as the Justice Department is considering charging WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange under the Espionage Act, we'll speak with Robert Meeropol, the son of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the only U.S. citizens to be executed under the Espionage Act.
Someone had passed America's atomic bomb secrets to Russia. This was an undisputed fact that the whole world knew. The federal government had laid the crime at the doorstep of two native New Yorkers, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. But to the end, they both protested their innocence of the theft. In April of 1951, the federal court of Judge Irving R. Kaufman found the pair guilty as charged and sentenced them to death in the electric chair to pay for their crime of treason.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A number of aid organizations in Afghanistan are challenging the Obama administration's recent claim that insurgents now control less territory than they did a year ago. Nick Lee, the director of the Afghanistan NGO Safety Office, told McClatchy newspapers, quote, "Absolutely, without any reservation, it is our opinion that the situation is a lot more insecure this year than it was last year." Chalice McDonough of the UN's World Food Program said, quote, "There are fewer places where we have completely unimpeded access." Security analysts say Taliban shadow governors still exert control in all but one of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. 2010 proved to be the deadliest year in Afghanistan for international troops. More than 700 foreign troops were killed on an average of about 2 per day. According to the United Nations, at least 2,400 civilians died in Afghanistan in the first 10 months of the year, and 3,800 were injured. Earlier today, at least 14 Afghan civilians died in a roadside blast in southern Helmand province. Ivory Coast's newly appointed ambassador to the United Nations has warned the country is on the brink of genocide following last month's disputed presidential election. President Laurent Gbagbo has refused to relinquish power to Alassane Ouattara, who is widely regarded as the winner of the election. Ambassador Youssoufou Bamba spoke in New York after being formally welcomed at the UN's headquarters.
173 people killed, only because they want to demonstrate, they want to speak out, they want to defend the will of the people. We think it's not acceptable. That's one of the messages I tried to get across during the consultation I've conducted so far, to tell we are on the brink of genocide. Something should be done.
Ivory Coast's ambassador to the United Nations, Youssoufou Bamba, was appointed by Alassane Ouattara after last month's election. Alain Leroy, the head of the UN peacekeeping operation in Ivory Coast, has accused President Gbagbo of using the airwaves to instigate violence.
The declarations I hear on the Ivorian state television are concerning us and are shocking us because they clearly instigate the population to turn against the united mission to Ivory Coast. Instigate towards hatred. It's very clear. That's how we interpret the incident that happened yesterday at Yopougon, that everybody saw. It's clearly a direct consequence of all the appeals to hatred, lies, and anti-ONUCI propaganda, which is advanced by the RTI.
In other news from the Ivory Coast, the prominent Washington lobbyist Lanny Davis has announced he's resigning from his job representing Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo. A former White House special counsel under President Clinton, Davis was hired to make the case Gbagbo won the November election. Davis's work overseas has often come under criticism. His recent clients include Ecuadorian Guinean dictator Teodoro Obiang, as well as key supporters of the 2009 coup in Honduras. Former Israeli President Moshe Katsav has been convicted of 2 counts of rape and faces at least 8 years in prison. Katsav was convicted of twice raping an aide when he served as tourism minister and of molesting or sexually harassing 2 other women during his presidency. A member of the right-wing Likud party, Katsav was Israel's first conservative president. President Obama has appointed Robert Ford to become the first U.S. ambassador to Syria since 2005, using a recess appointment to bypass opposition from Senate Republicans. The Bush administration withdrew its ambassador from Syria in February 2005, following the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri. On Wednesday, President Obama also appointed ambassadors to Turkey, the Czech Republic, and Azerbaijan. In addition, James Cole was appointed as Deputy Attorney General, the nation's second-ranking law enforcement post. In other diplomatic news, the United States has revoked the visa of the Venezuelan ambassador to Washington, Bernardo Alvarez Herrera. The move came after Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez said he would not allow Larry Palmer to be the U.S. ambassador to Venezuela. Chavez criticized Palmer for recently claiming Colombian rebels are finding refuge in Venezuela. Mexican and Honduran government officials have agreed to do more to protect Central American migrants as they travel north through Mexico. 2 weeks ago, some 50 Central American migrants were abducted in Mexico's southern state of Oaxaca after armed men held up the cargo train they were riding on. Honduran Deputy Secretary of Foreign Affairs Alden Rivera blamed drug cartels for much of the violence.
Provided to us by Honduran citizens who unfortunately have been the object of kidnappings because of their inability to pay a ransom. They are offered by the criminals to join their organizations. And we do have some information that some Hondurans are becoming part of these groups of organized crime.
Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour has suspended the life sentences of a pair of African-American sisters who'd served 16 years in prison for taking part in an $11 armed robbery. For years, civil rights advocates, including the NAACP, have called for the release of Jamie and Gladys Scott, often known just as the Scott sisters. One of the sisters, 38-year-old Jamie Scott, is in need of a kidney transplant. Her sister Gladys has agreed to donate one of her kidneys as a condition for her release from prison. In economic news, the latest figures from the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics show the unemployment rate for veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan remains above the national average. In November, 10% of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans were unemployed, compared with 9.1% of non-veterans. The Washington Post is reporting the U.S. government's expanding the number of names on its terrorist watch list by altering their criteria so that a single source tip can lead to a name being placed on the list. 440,000 people are now on the list, an increase of about 5% since last year. Civil liberties groups have argued that the government's new criteria have made it even more likely that individuals who pose no threat will be swept up in the nation's security apparatus. Chris Calabrese of the American Civil Liberties Union said, quote, "They are secret lists with no way for people to petition to get off or even to know if they're on." In news from Haiti, an American aid worker has been released from prison after being held for 18 days on accusations that he kidnapped an infant from a hospital where he worked as a volunteer. The aid worker, Paul Wegner, co-founder of Materials Management Relief Corps, after last January's devastating earthquake. In an interview last night on CNN, Wegner said the kidnapping accusations were part of an extortion plot. On Saturday, Dilma Rousseff will be sworn in as Brazil's first female president. Rousseff is a former leftist guerrilla who was imprisoned and tortured for 3 years during Brazil's dictatorship in the 1970s. She's a close ally of Brazil's outgoing president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. In a recent nationally televised address, Lula praised the progress Brazil has made over the past 8 years.
It is deeply symbolic that the presidential sash is being handed over from the first working-class president to the first female president. This will be a landmark in the beautiful path our people have been building to turn Brazil, if it's God's will, into one of the world's most equal countries.
A group of prominent conservative organizations are boycotting the upcoming Conservative Political Action Conference because a Republican gay rights organization called GOP Proud was invited to attend. Groups boycotting the event include the Family Research Council, Concerned Women for America, and the National Organization for Marriage. The Justice Department's investigating whether Tea Party favorite Christine O'Donnell violated federal law by diverting campaign funds for personal use. O'Donnell ran for Senate on the Republican ticket in Delaware. And in Alaska, Senator Lisa Murkowski is about to be certified the winner of Alaska's U.S. Senate race. Alaska's governor and lieutenant governor are set to sign papers today certifying Murkowski beat rival Joe Miller in the November race. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.